Nevada, and Salt Lake City, Utah.
Reno and Salt Lake City, Dr. Thomas?
There are places I really like the way the office runs, and I like still to be involved as a medical examiner.
And pretty good places to hike.
And good places to hike, yes.
So where did you do your work before you were semi-retired?
Right before I retired, I was at the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office as an assistant medical examiner. And do you want me to go before that?
Yes, if you could tell us your work experience as a medical examiner, forensic pathologist.
Sure. Initially, I started after my training at the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office, working as a deputy and assistant, then assistant medical examiner, and I was there for many years. And then in 1997, I joined the Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office that was based in Hastings. And then I was chief of that office for 13 years. And we were the medical examiner's office for 8 counties in Minnesota, the largest of which were Dakota and Scott counties. And we also served as an autopsy referral service and medical examiner's office for many other counties in Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin and even one in Michigan. And then when our office outgrew that space, Dakota and Scott counties merged with Hennepin County, and that's why then I came back to Hennepin County.
So over how many years have you performed work or services as a forensic pathologist?
Let's see, 37 now, 36.
And in Minnesota, how many counties?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've been the direct medical examiner for 8 counties. I've worked in offices that have been consultant to dozens of other counties.
And have you also performed those services in parts of Wisconsin?
Yes.
When did you stop working at the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office?
It was early 2017. I retired from Hennepin County.
And how many autopsies would you estimate you have performed?
Probably about 5,000 that I myself did, and then hundreds, maybe 1,000 more where I assisted someone else, or I supervised, or I participated in some way.
So in 5,000 or so cases, you've determined the cause and manner of death?
Well, actually way more than that, because as medical examiners, we don't just certify the cause and manner of death for the cases that we do autopsies on. There are numerous other cases that get reported by law to the medical examiner's office where we don't do a physical examination. So, for example, in a nursing home and gets a hip fracture and then dies a couple months later, that death has to be reported to the medical examiner's office. We will investigate that death by looking at the medical records and doing all of what I talked about, getting family input and medical provider input. But we generally will not do a physical examination, but still, by law, we have to sign the death certificate.
So you're still determining then the cause and manner of death?
Right. We're just not using a physical examination as part of it.
And using the medical records primarily?
Yes.
Dr. Thomas, are you licensed presently?
Yes, I'm licensed in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Nevada, and Utah.
Do you also hold any board certifications?
Yes, I'm board certified by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
Have you worked with any professional organizations over the years related to forensic pathology?
Yes, I've been a member of many different organizations. Association, American Medical Association, College of American Pathologists, American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and then I've been on the board of the Minnesota Coroners and Medical Examiners Association, probably 30-plus years. And then I'm a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners, and I was on that board and a member of their executive committee for a number of years.
And that goes by the acronym NAME, N-A-M-E?
Yes.
What does NAME do?
Well, they're the professional organization of medical legal death investigators, specifically forensic pathologists, medical examiners. And as an organization, they provide support to medical examiners, they provide information, they provide guidelines, an accreditation program, an inspection program, lots of ways of assisting medical examiner offices.
Dr. Thomas, have you done any teaching?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I have been a clinical instructor here at the University of Minnesota Department of Pathology. I've done training through the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension here in Minnesota, as well as, oh my gosh, teaching everything from, middle school science students through high school and college and all kinds of professional groups, whether it's other forensic pathologists, other law enforcement, you name the organization that comes into contact with death investigation, and I've probably talked to some of them at some point.
Do you have any publications?
That hasn't been a main focus of my career, but I have several, and early on was involved in an autopsy protocol that was ultimately published by the.
So let's switch topics and talk about your experience testifying in courts. Have you testified before in a court?
Yes, probably over 100 times.
And is that predominantly in your role as a medical examiner?
It's mostly in my role as a medical examiner, where I did the autopsy and then the prosecution would call me to testify as to my findings. I've also testified as an expert witness consultant in cases where I didn't do the autopsy, but I was called by maybe in a civil case, either by the defense or the plaintiff, if they thought there was a wrongful death or some question about medical malpractice, something like that. And then I've also been consulted and testified in cases at the request of the defense, again, not where I did the autopsy, but where I reviewed someone else's work, and then I consulted with the defense or testified.
And have you testified in Minnesota courts?
Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Pennsylvania. I think those are the ones. Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Thomas, are you being paid for your time and services in this case?
No.
Could you tell us about that? How does it come about that you're not being paid for your time and services in this case?
Well, I didn't ask to be paid.
And so did you reach out to the state, or did the state reach out to you?
No, you reached out to me. And, I knew this was going to be important. And I felt like I had something to offer, and I wanted to do what I could to help explain what I think happened.
Mm-hmm. So what were you asked to do then in this case?
Well, I was asked to review a lot of the materials and come to an independent conclusion about what I thought the cause and manner of death were and the mechanism for that cause.
Could you give the jurors a general sense or overview of the kinds of materials you reviewed?
May I look at my notes?
Yes, if you need to refresh your recollection.
So I looked at the Hennepin County Medical Examiner materials, including the autopsy report and toxicology and photographs and microscopic slides, things like that. I looked at the Hennepin County Medical Center records, so Mr. Floyd's past medical history from there, as well as Health Partners medical records. Then I looked at a lot of interviews, many, many videos, including body-worn camera videos, bystander videos, surveillance videos, some photographs, still photographs, timeline, and then some medical literature and textbooks.
So were you the medical examiner who investigated or did the autopsy around the death of George Floyd?
No, that was the Dr. Andrew Baker, the Hennepin County medical examiner.
Do you know Dr. Baker?
I do. He was a pathology resident when I was on staff at Hennepin County many years ago. And then when he did his fellowship, I was one of the staff people there. And then after our offices merged, I worked again with him at Hennepin County.
So would you have been then part of his training in his early formative years?
Yes.
All right. Do you consider him a friend?
I do, yes.
Have you talked to him about this case?
No, not since right after it happened.
But you did review his report,
Yes.
and as well as Mr. Floyd's medical records.
Yes.
Did you review the history of terminal events for May 25th, 2020?
Yes.
So
And what was kind of unique, what was absolutely unique in this case was the volume of materials I had to review. I've never had a case like this that had such thorough documentation of the terminal events.
And by way of the thorough documentation, what makes it so thorough, in your opinion?
Well, the use of videos is unique in this case. Certainly, as medical examiners, we use videos, but there's never been a case that I've been involved with that had videos over such a long time frame and from so many different perspectives.
Are you aware then of Dr. Baker's conclusions then on the manner of death?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to show Exhibit 193 that's been stipulated to subject to Dr. Baker's foundation. So first, Dr. Thomas, what do we see here on Exhibit 193?
This is a copy of the certificate of death of Mr. Floyd.
Okay. And so, Brad, if we could kind of highlight just through the word underlying, just to make it a little bigger to see. Okay. Based on your review of the evidence and the death certificate, do you agree with Dr. Baker's determination on the cause of death?
Yes, I do.
And is that by the word immediate on here?
Yes, cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement, subdual, restraint, and neck compression.
Have you, Dr. Thomas, formed an opinion about the mechanism of death?
Yes.
Would you tell us what that is?
In this case, I believe the primary mechanism of death is asphyxia or low oxygen.
So we'll come back to the mechanism in just a minute. Can you explain to the jury what this cause of death means and why you agree with it?
Well, it's kind of in two parts. So there's the cardiopulmonary arrest, which it doesn't provide a lot of additional clarifying information because in a way everyone dies of when your heart stops and your lungs stop. That's cardiopulmonary arrest. But as a forensic pathologist, I would use cardiopulmonary arrest when to differentiate it from a cardiac arrest. So this is not a sudden cardiac death, a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. This is a death where both the heart and lungs stopped working. And the point is that it's due to law enforcement, subdual, restraint, and compression. That is kind of what ultimately is the immediate cause of death, is the subdual, restraint, and compression.
And just so it's clear for the jurors, does cardiopulmonary arrest mean heart attack?
No.
Does it mean fatal arrhythmia as a primary cause of death?
No.
It simply means that the heart stops and the lungs have stopped.
Correct.
It's another way of simply describing death itself.
Right.
Can you explain what's referred to, looking here at the terms, subdual, restraint, and neck compression?
Those were activities by the law enforcement agency officers involved. Subdual is subduing someone, trying to restrain them is, in Mr. Floyd's case, involved handcuffing him, his positioning on the ground, the prone position, the people kneeling on him. And the neck compression is the knee on the neck specifically. Additionally, there was some back and other things being compressed by the officers.
So if you put all this together, cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating, law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression, what does that mean?
Well, what it means to me is that the activities of the law enforcement officers resulted in Mr. Floyd's death, and that specifically those activities were the subdual, the restraint, and the neck compression.
And does this then also represent your own conclusion?
Yes.
A conclusion you have reached and an opinion you hold to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
Would you tell us what you reviewed in order to reach this conclusion?
All of those things that I mentioned earlier, again, what's sort of unique about this case is that often I would just review the medical examiner case file, and that would provide information about what the cause and manner of death is. But in this case, the autopsy itself didn't tell me the cause and manner of death, and it really required getting all of this other additional information, specifically the video evidence of the terminal events, to conclude the cause of death and manner of death.
When you make reference to something called the mechanism of death,
Yeah.
would you tell us what mechanism of death means?
So, cause of death is what's the thing, the disease or the injury or the process that caused someone's death. But the mechanism is kind of what was going on in the body at that time. So, for example, the cause of death might be a gunshot wound, but the mechanism of death might be blood loss related to that gunshot wound, or, an infection that